Good morning to all. In the earlier class, we have dealt with what do you mean by filmic adaptation and what do you mean by literary adaptation and what is the relation between these two. Now we'll move on to the narrative strategies that is embedded within film and fiction. If you take literature and film, they are two distinctive texts. Two distinctive texts with different functions, different means of communication and everything. Even the narrative structure, even though a bit same, is completely different. I mean, especially when it comes to modern filmmaking and its processes, the narration undergoes a lot of different types of seamless narrations. So, therefore, adaptation brings up certain issues, especially when you are converting certain different novels into film, and especially certain films which have its own textual or intertextual language in terms of narration. Now, the first issue regarding narrative strategy or narration is comparative narratology. That's one in which asks questions such as what events from the novel story have been eliminated, added, or changed in the adaptation and why. There should be a reason why. Certain characters, if you look at it, let's say a novel like Harry Potter series, one of the novels in Harry Potter series, or let's say Lord of the Rings, for instance, certain characters has been eliminated. Even if you take a series like Game of Thrones, it might not have the same relation to the original Game of Thrones book. In certain characters which might appear only in two episodes, or not two episodes, two chapters in the original book might have been extended in a greater form in the film. It will happen, and also vice versa. It will also happen in a vice versa form. That is, a film might be having a film might have a character which might appear only in two scenes, but in the novel, that character might be one which will appear in every chapter in that novel. So, why is it that these characters are added or subtracted or even changed in the adaptation? There might be a reason. Maybe because of the fact that the director doesn't feel that the character was not that promising. Even though it is so integral within the novel, he wants to narrate a different version of the novel. Maybe that's the reason. So that comparison is a problem, especially when it comes to narratology. What point of view that you want to follow in the narration. Now, the second issue is order, the order of the narration. Especially narration touches on questions of linear versus non-linear sequence. That is, linear means an order. You have a beginning, middle, end. You might be talking about a king and his sudden decline or death. So you'll start from his birth, then to his adolescence, then teenage, and then to final his life as a man, and then his life as an old man. So this is a linear progression. Whereas non-linear sequences, you might start the story in media res or in the middle of things, so that you will get directly into the narration. Now that's again a choice which is being made by the director. That's also an issue because there is an innate comparison that goes on between these types of narration when you are choosing a different kind of narration completely apart from the novel. Third function is duration, the time period. Maybe the 2 hours, 3 hours, or maybe a novel will take about like maybe 2 days even to complete some novels. Whereas when it comes to films, you have to condense these 1,000 or maybe 800 pages of novel into a 2-hour format film. That's another problem. Duration involves complex relation between discourse, the time duration, an event really lasted in novel as well as in film. As I have told you in the earlier classes, drama is more conducive to filmic adaptation because drama is made for an audience who could sit there and watch the drama for maybe 1 hour or maybe an extension of 2 hours. So mostly drama is more suited to filmic adaptation, whereas novel is not, especially when it comes to duration. Next is the temporal sense, the spatial and temporal settings. In temporal sense, some adaptation clearly contains the events of the novel, necessary when adapting books like War and Peace. Sometimes you have to condense certain episodes, or let's say certain events which appears in a novel like War and Peace. It's a huge novel, so obviously you cannot touch almost every fact within that novel, so you have to condense it. You have to eliminate or delete, or let's say skip a lot of things, which obviously as a novel you find it really important, but as a film you have to undergo a lot of cutting to get the final product limited to a 2 hour or maybe a 3 hour duration. Next, Eric von Stroheim attempted a literal adaptation of Frank Norris's novel MacTeague into a film called Greed. It is a 16 hours long. Now, what happens when you are trying to adapt the novel exactly into a film? The best example or best chaotic example is Greed, which was released in 1924. The footage was about 16 hours long. Then they have cut the film into 8 hours. Then again it was cut into 4 hours. Then the studio intervened and they cut the film into 2 hours. The result is that the finished product becomes entirely incoherent. That is, you can't make up what the director was trying to narrate, because it was really difficult. They should have planned it before the shoot. Now the problem here is that they have planned it in the editing table, so this is what you call as lost in translation. So there was no planning. They thought that they could make it within the 2 hours, and it's not possible. You should go through a proper format, or let's say a proper planning to do a novel. You have to put in a lot of research for that. Now things have become different. You have softwares which could even measure the how many time that you are investing for each and every scene. Everything is available today. So but those during those time you have to trust your instincts. So that's the reason why Greed went on to become such a failure. Therefore, elision, or let's say dropping of certain scenes, is mandatory, especially when you are converting a novel into a film. Novelist is always unaffected by questions of budget. He only needs time, talent, paper, and pen. But films are from the outset immersed in technology and commerce. Now look at a novel like Metamorphosis, or The Trial, or let's say The Stranger, El Stranger by Albert Camus. These are existential novels. You have and if you, I don't know whether you can consider it as a proper commercial film. Yet there are certain independent films and art films which has become great commercial success. You have Blow Up of not Michael Antoni, uh, uh, sorry, yes, Michael Antoni's Blow Up becoming the first commercial, first art film to become a proper commercial. But that's sometimes these kinds of things has become an exception. When it comes to novelist, they focus more on the theme and how to convey that theme. They don't, especially when a novelist try to write a novel, he or she doesn't have an idea whether this novel is going to be a film. He's not bothered about that. So therefore, he is not bothered about the budget, the time, the talent, paper, and pen. He's not affected by this. Whereas when you are taking a film, you have to be really updated in this technology and the commerce. Your film should stand the test of the time, so it should have a camera or equipment or a filmic aura which is more updated. And even the marketing should be in such a way that the film should make its mark among the public. It should have stars like Marlon Brando, or Marilyn Monroe, somebody like that, to make it more commercially viable. So a lot of things went on, goes into the marketing of a film. The question of material infrastructure for the novelist only at distribution, but for cinema it starts from beginning. So question of material infrastructure for the novelist only the distribution. The novelist is bothered more about this commercial benefit only at the time of distributing that novel. But for cinema, they have to start it from the first stage of the writing itself. The result is there is a question of what scenes can be filmed. I mean, which are the scenes should be avoided, because scenes which are literally a bit boring, obviously they want to avoid it. Which are not that enthusiastic, they want to avoid it. It might be a very good scene when you read a novel, but you don't want to include it because in the film it is so boring. So as a result, a lot of scenes are skimmed or skipped. And filmmakers with the same aesthetic sense can churn out different versions of a particular. That has happened in the past. I can't come up with an example as of now. They come up with different aesthetic sense of the same book itself. Then you have next section, that is fidelity theory or faithfulness theory, about the faithfulness of adaptation. It is also called as equivalency theory. And what is this theory all about? The idea that the filmmaker finds the equivalence in a new medium for the novel's style and techniques, which obviously in reality it is not possible. It's just a theory which is more palpable to your fantasy as a filmmaker or as a writer. The idea that the filmmaker finds the equivalence in a new medium for the novel style and techniques, because you cannot find uh, uh, an art which could equal another art. Drama in itself is a different genre. It can never equal uh, a novel's brilliance. At the same time, a novel cannot also equal the brilliance of a drama. Every convention, every art, every genre has its own merit, its own authenticity, and its own time duration, and its own style and techniques. So you cannot equalize your status when it comes to a literary genre or as an art form. So fidelity theory or equivalence theory in reality is not possible. It still remains as a fantasy idea. Obviously, film is also a multi-dimensional medium. It can play with words. You have written and spoken words. A lot of dialogues goes into it, and also you can even communicate uh, certain sections or certain scenes through music, sound effects, and moving photographic images. Whereas novel is a single track. You have only one means of communicating with the book, and that is only through reading. Whereas a film not only uses the visual, it also uses sound to make you to make you be more one, or let's say one with the character or one with the whole story. A novel has been produced by a single individual, whereas film is a collaborative effort. We have discussed about that aspect of film in the earlier chapters, because it is a especially when it comes to the auteur theory. Film is now considered to be a collaborative effort and not something which is more author oriented or director oriented. A literary text can generate infinity of reading. So many adaptations therefore is possible. Yes, a novel which has been read by me, you know, I'll give you a simple example. You have Steven Spielberg's film Catch Me If You Can, and when I saw the film for the first time, what struck me most is the climax, or let's say pre-climax of the film, where DiCaprio's character is being sorry, not exactly the climax. Actually, the even the centrality of the story has something to do with Asian or Indian aesthetics or Indian aesthetic emotions. Now, if you look at DiCaprio's character in that film, DiCaprio's character does it only for one thing, and that is to get his mother and father reunite. I mean, they are divorced, and he suddenly finds out that the only problem between them is about the lack of money. So, therefore, he cheats people so that he could get the money to reunite his family. Don't you feel that it has got a connection with Indian emotion? Family is important. In Japan and Korea and even in India, families are really important. Obviously, in the West also, families are important, but still, you cannot even imagine a person doing these crazy things to make his mother and father unite again. So that has got a connection. Now, when I saw the film, I have got that connection, but I don't think any other people might not have, might have. Some people might think that, okay, that's a kind of a, it's a very good, in a different way, it is a kind of a heist film. It's a con film actually, where this DiCaprio's character is conning almost everyone. That sounds like fun. It's more an adventure story. And for some, it might be a coming of age story. So the way you read a text, it might be a novel, drama, or film, it just gives you a different interpretation or take on your own perception. An adaptation in this sense is a work of re-accentuation. So every adaptation has a different take. You have Tennessee Williams, Glass Menagerie. Different versions of Glass Menagerie has been made. You have a Malayalam version. You have a film like Agale, which is a different take. It might not be the same. There is an American version which is really good. It starts in a different way. So every adaptation have every different way of using it. It has different directors, different actors, and different way of narration. So every person comes up with new discoveries when they are trying to do a different narration. Then intertextual dialogism. It's also a major development in adaptation theory. Because intertextual dialogism helped film criticism to transcend and approve of fidelity. What do you mean by intertextuality? Nowadays a lot of people do tell us that there is a copying of this scene from that film. Some say that it is inspiration, and today most of the people would like to equate inspiration with copy, but I would like to say that they are intertextual. A person, let's say the most famous scene in Godfather First, where Michael Corleone, the character played by I just don't remember the actor's name. Yes, Al Pacino. Al Pacino he kills the first man. He kills a police officer in a coffee shop. I think it's a police officer in a coffee shop. The same scene has been used in Malayalam film and also in Hindi film. You have a film like, but in a different way. You have Abhimanyu, directed by Priyadarshan, where the same scene happens in a different way. In Al Pacino's Godfather, the pistol that he's using to shoot is being tapped into a bathroom. I think he gets that from the bathroom. He has already arranged it with another person. Whereas in Priyadarshan's Abhimanyu, you have that pistol has been wrapped around under the table. Same thing happens in the film called Vastav, directed by Mahesh Manjrekar, starring Sanjay Dutt. Same thing happens. There is not much change. Whatever that happens in Abhimanyu happens in Vastav too. So this is what you call as intertextuality. It's not called as copying. And intertextual dialogism is, coming up with, going on the same line of the dialogue but in a different way. In adaptation theory, therefore, it helps film criticism to transcend and approve of fidelity. And therefore, that also has got its own function when it comes to adaptation theory or faithfulness in adaptation. Now, adaptation should be faithful not so much to the source text, but rather to the essential traits of the medium of expression. The expression should be more, more faithful, not the source. You can make a film out of a 2-page short story. You can make the different versions of the same short story. It is possible, because that happens because the way you are expressing it might be different. For example, imagine that there is a short story with the hero as the narrator. He's telling us about the heroine and about himself and his mother, etc. Now you can take it as a film, and then suddenly another director comes up with a different interpretation. Rather than giving too much focus on the hero, now this director starts narrating the film from the heroine's point of view, but the basic storyline is the same, but he he comes up with a different take on the whole issue. Now the woman is the narrator and not the man, so it's a different take altogether. This is what you call as expression, coming up with a different expression of narration. Thus, autonomy of both should be accepted. So, therefore, whether it is adaptation, whether it is filmic adaptation or literal adaptation, whatever kinds of adaptation, whether it is a faithful adaptation or an unfaithful adaptation, or page by page adaptation, or even episode by episode, chapter by chapter adaptation, everything should be accepted and honored, because every way of adaptation has its own autonomy, its own authority. Next is narration. Within narration, you have temporal and spatial elements. No? Tem- Temporal and spatial elements. So temporal means space and its setting. Where does the story happens? What is the time period? What's the space? Whether it is happening in England or India. What is the time period? Whether it happens in 1 week or maybe 2 days or maybe 20 years. So this spatial elements plus narration is what makes a proper film. I mean, meaning of the film is defined by these two aspects, especially narration. The stories are narrated through the medium of TV, cinema, and video, and not through novels. Novel might be having a narration, but that's a different way. First person, second person, third person narrator. Uh, Medium of TV and cinema and video. TV and the various programs that it narrates. During the Doordarshan times, there used to be a lot of telefilms. There used to be a lot of serials which gives importance to family, even giving focus on what was the life of Naxalites during those era. So it gives us a narration about what could have been the life of Naxalites during the 90s or maybe the 80s. So that's a narration that these stories provide. Now, in film, meaning is attributed through other characteristics like the character, dialogue, etc. Exactly. It is the characters that drive the story. And when it drives the story, it becomes a screenplay. And when you have a screenplay, obviously it gives rise to dialogues. You have three forms of narrative. First one is tandem narrative. That is equally weighted stories running simultaneously. That two different stories or maybe two or more stories running parallelly. You have a film like Traffic, where characters and their narration and their life happens parallelly. Then you have multiple protagonists, that is either missions, reunions, or physical and emotional journeys. Whether it is missions or reunions or physical and emotional journey, multiple protagonists, two or more heroes, or maybe three or four heroes. Same, I think Graphic is also an example. It is all about groups and not about a single hero or a single journey. You have films like Inaratu's Babel. Is a very good example. You have different stories happening in different parts of the world. Almost every story is important, so it has equal time space, and the same time every hero is important. Even it is Gabriel Garcia Marnell or Bernal, or whether it is Brad Pitt or Kate Blanchett, every character is important. Multiple protagonists. Then you have double journeys, that is two important protagonists journeying either towards, apart, or parallel with each other physically or emotionally. A kind of multiple protagonist form having their own plotline. The best example I could give you is Fateh Akin's film The Edge of Heaven. Two stories happening parallelly, two important different protagonists and their journey towards a maybe for the same aim or for the different aims. So these are the three forms of narrative, especially when it comes to film, TV. So that's it for today. The rest of the class, we will take it in the next class. Thank you for cooperation. Bye.